We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Good Monday morning to you everywhere out there in the internet world. This is the Born to Talk radio show, and I am your host, Marsha Wietecha, coming to you live from the LA Talk Live studios in beautiful Westchester. I want to tell you something about Westchester in case you don't have a clue where that might be. We are literally an arm's length away from LA airport. And on the way over to the studio today, I was 2 cars from coming through the intersection to take me to the studio when there was the most massive amount of police and sheriff display of what in the world is going on in my community. And clearly what was happening is somebody of a high importance was on their way to the airport. I'm not exactly sure who it might have been. I don't know if one of the president's cabinet members in town, but I can just tell you traffic came to a stop. I hope nobody missed their flight. It was about 10 minutes worth, but what's the way my morning started. But this show isn't really about how my morning started. This show really is about my guest, and it is my pleasure to introduce Kenneth D. Carson to my show, better known as KC from this point forward. Welcome to the show, KC.
Thank you, Marsha. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here. This is not a new situation to you, is it?
No,
it's not.
I actually am very comfortable in this place, and I'm happy to be.
And why would that be that you would be so comfortable in this place?
Well, I am actually blessed to have a radio show on this station as well. It's a radio show called The Call, and it's a sickle cell disease advocacy radio station.
And you are the executive producer.
Yes, and I'm the executive producer.
You are.
And I have a wonderful cast that joins me on that show.
Terrific. And that isn't all. You're not just another pretty face. Oh, that isn't the only thing you do. I wish you could see. If you're not watching, you're missing the boat here, because this man has a smile that just like stops signals.
Oh,
it's a beautiful smile.
Oh,
but you're also the president, and I want to say it correct, of the Life in the Blood Sickle Cell Disease Foundation. So that's something else that, because you are a warrior. I mean, there is no doubt about that. You are involved with that as well.
Absolutely. Life in the Blood is a foundation that I started to address some issues in our community, and it's certainly part of my advocacy work, as well as the show. And sickle cell disease is an issue that is having its day now.
Right.
Really, really coming into some really, really good work, things happening in the community and happening for our community. But we still face a lot of challenges. And
there's
so
one other
Life in the Blood is
one of those
things that we're doing to
absolutely
make good things happen.
There's one other thing that I wanted to say about you, because it's important, and it's important about who you are as KC the man, and that is, and I want to read this properly,
Certainly.
A called and anointed minister of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because I know that your faith is supremely important to you, and I didn't want this show to go on without stating that.
Well, thank you, Marsha. And again, I know that you know how much of a part of me that is. And,
I do.
And in our community, faith is one of the main things to keep us going with the challenges that we face on a day-to-day level. And I have experienced faith healings and seen people healed from this disease by their faith. And that's something that, again, as a minister as well as an advocate, that I would certainly advocate for. And
Absolutely.
that is the wholeness that comes in Jesus Christ.
So let's share with the audience a little bit about, I say to people, my show is about conversations plus connections equals community. But really what I know is, what's your story? And you have a story, my friend. So let's start at the beginning. Let's share with our audiences, because you have a show, I have the show, a little bit about your background. Tell me about where you grew up, and just where how did you get here? Tell me about this.
Well, I was blessed, Marsha, to grow up in one of the most American towns in America. It's a town called Wheaton, Illinois, and its claim to fame is its Christian university, which is where Billy Graham graduated from. And it is just really an idyllic community, and I really love to share the story of how both of my parents' families came to Wheaton during the Great Migration, when African Americans migrated from the South the first one was from 1910 to 1930, and then the second one where my parents came up were people who followed their family members who came up during the first migration, and my family landed in Wheaton, Illinois, and both of my parents met in high school, and the same high school that I went to.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so I feel very much about my community the way that you feel about your community here. It's hometown, and it's a really beautiful community. And I grew up with the world's greatest mom, of course. You know, my dad, probably one of the most upstanding men that I've ever known. He was a police officer.
Oh, no kidding.
And and so, you know, I had some really, really good roots. I have 5 sisters and a brother. 5 female first cousins, and my grandmother and her 4 sisters. And
we're talking
so
a lot of
women in my life growing up.
Exactly.
Which was great because when you grow up with sickle cell disease, you know, you need a lot of love, and I did get a lot of love.
So the 8 children.
Yeah, 7 children.
7 children.
7 children.
So 5 sisters.
And a brother.
Yeah. What number were you in the order?
I was number 5.
You were number
5. So I'm one of the spoiled ones. Me and I have 2 younger sisters.
Nice.
And an older brother.
Nice.
And 3 older sisters. And again, just a really, really close family. Of course, grew up in faith, and it was wonderful education, and just really, really a great place to, really an idyllic childhood.
Nice.
That was really, really amazing. And as far as, you know, my more formative years, I decided at a very young age that the most value that I could bring to the world would be through learning how to love people well. And my life was really committed to that aspect. You know, I realized that, you know, I just never really had the desire to have the type of success that the world calls success. And I realized that it would be my relationships that would really be the most value that I could bring into my life. And so I really focused on having loving relationships and on affecting people's lives with the love of Christ. And so that manifested in different ministries that I worked with, and you know, Homes for Humanity. And no matter what job I was working in, I worked a variety of jobs. I finally kind of settled into the field of security and private investigation, and just did some fun things with that. You know, it's nice following people around and taking pictures and stuff, you know. But it's a lot of driving. But I really enjoyed that. And before I ended up going on disability, my last job was at a bank for 6 years, and you know, I ran their mailroom, and that was, you know, what it was.
What brought you out to from Illinois out to Los Angeles?
Well, this again, as I got a little further into the ministry, there came a point where I was helping the homeless and things like that, and I met my lovely wife, and kind of had an instant family, and got married in 2010, and.
Out here? Were you already
here?
No,
actually, I was in Chicago when I got married still.
Right.
And then my wife passed away, unfortunately, but it happens. And so I had some major life changes, and then I had a sickle cell issue that almost killed me. And
oh, dear.
We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
And then after recovering from that and really going through, I came out here to visit a friend of mine who lives in Culver City. And
Not
just
far from here.
fell in love with L.A. I never had any desire really to come out here, but this was a friend who I met he was going to Wheaton College, and he eventually moved out here, and man, I came out here and I just fell in love with L.A. instantly, and I said, if I ever get the opportunity, man, I'm coming.
You're staying.
And so that was the next year when I just literally, you know, sold and gave away everything I had, packed 2 suitcases,
and off you went,
and came
to
bought a one-way ticket to LA, and
wow.
landed in Willowbrook over in South LA, and started going to a wonderful church there, pastored by Dr. Dolores Glass, who unfortunately just passed recently.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and again, she was a real leader in that community, and someone who really supported my efforts in advocacy in that community, because again, the sickle cell issue is certainly something that we need to make, raise awareness of.
Speaking of that, so excuse my interruption, but why don't we take this moment to actually define for people that are not familiar with what sickle cell disease is. I was wondering if you could sort of put a definition to sickle cell disease.
Certainly, yeah. Okay, sickle cell disease is an inherited red blood cell disorder that affects the hemoglobin in the red blood cell. Now, the hemoglobin is the chemical that's responsible for picking up oxygen in the lungs and delivering it to the tissues of the body, and then I believe it also picks up the carbon monoxide that's being exuded by the muscles and stuff and brings it back out and it gets rid of it. And for people with sickle cell disease, the hemoglobin is malfunctioning, and it causes the red blood cell to become misshapen and sticky, and it no longer picks up oxygen when it goes through the lungs, and it's not doing its job. And not only that, but the red blood cells also that are sickling don't live as long as normal red blood cells.
No kidding.
Normal blood cell will live for about 120, 130 days, whereas a sickle cell will live probably 20 to 40 days. And so the early death of these sickling cells causes a condition which is known as anemia. And so people who inherit and let me explain what I mean by an inherited disorder. It means that we get this from our parents. It's passed on in their genes, the same way your color of your eyes or the color of your hair is passed on. And a child inherits one gene from each parent. And if each parent has one of the sickling genes, the child can have what's called sickle cell anemia, which is when they inherit two sickling genes. Now, there are different types of sickling genes. Like my condition is called sickle SC disease, and that's because one of my parents had a gene that causes sickling. The other one has a gene that causes crystallizing of the hemoglobin. And so the SC, and I inherited both of those genes from my parents. And again, we're going to demonstrate. We'll talk a little bit more about how that is inherited.
All right.
But so sickle cell is basically those hemoglobin disorders that are represented by different letters, but primary one being S, and A being the normal hemoglobin.
Got it. And I actually have on the camera on our site a picture that's sickling because it's sort of curved.
Right.
It sounds like we're going to be taking our first break, which I knew this is exactly what was going to happen.
Right.
I knew that was going to happen, and it's okay because it's organic, right, my friend?
It's beautiful.
And when we come back, I want to talk about the difference between sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait. All right.
All right.
We're going to take a short break, everybody. Stay right tuned. We'll be right back.
Stay strong for them. Oh, yes, I did. When everybody disappears, it's only you who keeps me.
Hi, this is Marsha Wietecha inviting you to join me every Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific, for Marsha's Music Shuffle. My show features music from the 60s and beyond, bringing you artists and songs that touch us in so many ways with lyrics, rhythm, and voices. Put your dancing shoes on and join me every Monday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific, for Marsha's Music Shuffle, exclusively on LATalkLive.com. Reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Hi, this is Marsha Wietecha, inviting you to join me every Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific, for Born to Talk, where conversations plus connections equals community. This is the heart of my show each week as my guests share their stories, from nonprofits, authors, sports figures, travel experts, and much more. If you have a story to tell, I want to share it. Don't forget to tune in to Born to Talk every Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on LATalkLive.com. And you can watch live on Facebook and Twitter. If you missed the live show, check out my website, borntotalkradioshow.com, where you can watch on demand. Born to Talk, every Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific, where conversations plus connections equals community. Reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
But I'm still alive.
Okay, we talked a little bit about music, you and I, didn't we? And I love the choices of the music that you selected for me to play for you. And this is called Soldier of Love.
Too, though, and I really
did.
appreciate your music as well.
Well, but this is Sade. She doesn't spell that right, does she? I mean, what's wrong with
how do you
where's
get
the
that?
H?
Right.
Sade, S-A-D-E. Sade.
Right,
Of course, we would all say that.
But we
All
love
right.
her anyway.
We do. Doesn't she have a great
Oh,
voice? Oh my goodness.
And that song there is just the story of my life, man. I'm a lover. And, when I talk about my career, people really laugh when I tell them I'm a professional lover.
There
That's
you
what I
go.
do.
Didn't they say, I want to be just like you?
Hey, what better can we do with our lives?
Exactly.
And again, I've had good days and bad days, but,
Sure.
those good days were really good.
There you go. So when we got to the break, we were just to the point where I wanted to really focus on this, because education and advocacy, that's what we're really going to be talking
Absolutely.
about a lot today.
Absolutely.
So you described with the sickle cell disease, as you talked about sickle cell anemia.
Correct.
What is sickle cell trait? How is that different?
Okay. Now, again, this disease manifests itself because of genes that we pass on. Now, the normal hemoglobin gene is an A, and every normal person has 2 of those genes, people who don't have it. People who have sickle cell trait have one normal gene and then one of the sickling trait genes, which can be anything from sickle S, which is the first one that was discovered, to sickle E, to sickle thalassemia, beta thalassemia, alpha. There's a number
ton of them,
There's like HE, and it really thalassemia was first discovered in Europeans and people of the Mediterranean area, Greeks, Italians, and then some of the H's and E's are Southeast Asia, and also South America have the S and the C. They have, but again, the one thing that we really like to make clear is that this is a disease that affects every race. It's perceived very much as a black disease because the majority of people who have the disease are African American. It affects about 100,000 African Americans in America right now who have the disease. There are about 3 million people in America who are carrying the trait, and they are not all African Americans, neither are all those who have the disease. Again, it can be anyone who lived in an area where there was malaria, because this gene actually began to mutate to protect people from malaria. And it was one of the first diseases that was able to be tracked regionally because of where they tracked malaria. And they found out that when you have the trait, you have a lesser chance of catching malaria, and if you catch it, you have a less chance of dying from it. But if you actually have the disease where you have 2 S hemoglobin, you have a lesser chance of catching malaria, but if you catch it, you have a greater chance of dying from it.
Oh my gosh.
And so, again, it's the body, doing what it does, so amazingly, trying to protect us from another disease. But the problem happens when we get 2 of the S genes or any of the other variations of the trait genes to come together to create the disease. And it really is a terrible disease. But yeah, the difference between the trait is one is a carrier of carrying one of those genes, but they have a normal gene. And again, there's much need for research into whether or not trait is actually, again, they consider it a disease. They don't consider it a disease. And unfortunately, there are people who still suffer from issues because of that. There are a number of trait issues such as rhabdomyolysis, which happens under stress and exertion and dehydration, where your muscle tissues begins to break down and your body becomes hypoxic, and you can actually shut down your organs, and people have died athletes and soldiers have died from this trait issue. There are also a number of renal issues that are associated with the disease. And so again, I think there's a lot more research needed to really determine
Absolutely.
if trait is in itself a disease, but
It's a condition for
yeah,
certain.
it's
that,
certainly
that,
a condition.
that leads me into my next question, and actually made me think about Farhan.
Yeah.
You have a show that you executive produce called This Is the Call. Farhan is one of the cast members
Absolutely.
who didn't know that he had sickle cell trait until he had the
Absolutely.
exertion while he was
Right,
in the
when he was in
military.
the service, and he had the exertion incident that manifested in rhabdomyolysis, and it almost killed him, you know, and it ruined his career. I mean, because of the effects of it in his body, and he's become a tireless advocate for the sickle trait community.
He has.
And the issue, and we're very thankful for him. And then I also have 3 other cast members on the show, and just to give you an idea of what the call is about, it's 3 different community-based organizations: WDC,
What's the count?
What's the Count, and Life in the Blood Sickle Cell Disease Foundation, as well as No Pain in the Playroom, which is represented by Omika Edwards and Diamond Edmondson, both of who have sickle cell disease, and again, and then also my partner in Life in the Blood, Shabrian Howard, who also has the disease. And the point of the show is that we're stepping outside of our organizations, and we're representing as members of the community who have come together in unity, and to have the conversation about how, as a community, we unify and create our voice and use that voice powerfully to speak towards our issues and to create change. And so we're doing that by drawing the voice of the community out through surveys and different interactions that we do online, and also phone calls and interviews,
Sure.
and then also trying to bring our leadership together, the people who are our leaders in our community, who have a plan and are ready to go, you know, and we get our warriors lined up and start accomplishing some things, and really answering that call in our community for unity.
You bet.
And so
That's terrific. And are you on twice a month?
we're on twice a month on Saturdays right now, and
At 5?
at 5:30
5:30.
we've been following the WDC show.
Okay, terrific.
And What's the Count on radio. And
Well,
so
that's great. Well,
we're
I
doing
would
great.
encourage those of you that are listening and want really a show devoted each and every episode to this cause. This will be an important show for people to follow.
Absolutely. Again, it's one of those shows where it's very representative in regards to what life is like living in this community, and what each, you know, again, our community is so amazing and so rich. I can't wait to share a little bit more about that.
Well, you know, you're leading me to one of my questions, which
Okay.
is, so how old were you when you were diagnosed with sickle cell?
You know, I actually was diagnosed with sickle cell disease like around 10 years old. And again, I was born in 1959, and they were just really starting to learn about the disease. I actually was born in a very good place for it, because Chicago was where sickle cell was discovered.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, by Dr. Harris or Herrick, I believe, in 1910. And the U of I, University of Illinois in Chicago, has been doing some great work, and recently participated in the first adult receiving our current cure for the disease, which is bone marrow transplant.
Oh, we're going to be talking
Yeah,
about treatment.
and we'll talk about
so
treatment
you
a
were
little bit.
diagnosed at age 10,
At
and you were
10.
number 5 in the family.
Right, and
What was it like? Were you the only child that was that has sickle cell disease?
actually, no. I had one sister, an older sister, who had the disease, and it kind of worked out to the odds. This is a 1 in 4 chance that each child will have it, and so 2 out of 7. You know, it's right around the odds. But
What was it like being a 10-year-old little boy with sickle cell disease?
you know, I think it was challenging to the extent that any sick kid, you know, on the block has those challenges. You know, you don't run the fastest, you don't jump the highest, you're not the strongest, and those things are always being tested in youth. and in one way or another. I had some learning disabilities that I was challenged with, so as well as having these long episodes where I would be at home sick, unable to go to school, just needing the extra care and the extra time from a mother who was, had at that time 5 kids, and just really, really blessed that I had great family support. My sister Debbie was really my first nurse. She was the one that always took care of me. And, when I had a crisis, and a crisis is when you have an episode of clotting in the smaller blood vessels in the arms and in the legs and in the bones, and it causes a great deal of pain. And so when I would have these pain episodes, I would need to have warm compresses put on my arm, and, I would need actually some analgesics, aspirin, whatever was available at the time. And once I was diagnosed and they realized what the disease was, I began a little more comprehensive treatment of getting fluids and stronger pain medication, because, again, this pain is something that is the primary issue with our acute instances, is the pain, and getting that under control. So, again, I was blessed to have the support of my family, with 5 sisters and my auntie and my mom and my grandma. I was always being loved on, when I was sick, and so I really, really had some good medicine.
So that was what it was, the experience like as a child. Was it different as an adult?
As an adult, you get into the challenges of, first of all, I kind of had a curse put on my life by a doctor when I was 18 years old, who decided to share with me the fact that I'd be dead by the time I was 40.
Oh, how swell.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful
uplifting,
thing to
Thanks,
share
Doc.
with a kid, This was when I went in and first had the manifestation of bone disease, of avascular necrosis, and I was getting pain in my hips and in my legs. And again, it's a really unfortunate thing that doctors would think to do that, but as I have found out recently, it certainly wasn't just me. They do this with a lot of kids who have sickle cell disease, and it really can put you in a place mentally, where you're not expecting much more out of life. And when I made that decision,
that's pretty discouraging to hear.
Yeah. Well, again, you don't really know what to think, because as a kid, you don't have a concept of death.
Right.
You don't really. I mean, you're as alive as you're ever going to be.
Right.
At 18. And so when somebody says something like that, it really causes you to, have to do some introspection. And that's kind of where I came up with the idea that, the most value that I could get out of my life would be in how I applied love on a day-to-day basis. And I really didn't think much in the way of career. And I never thought I would own a home.
Because you thought your life had such a limitation.
Absolutely. And again, it was, dealing with that mental challenge there, and trying to maintain a positive outlook and keeping yourself moving forward. And I did. I had some wonderful life experiences. I worked in some wonderful jobs. I've always been a worker. And but it was the challenge of my body slowly deteriorating. At one point, I lost vision in my left eye, and it was like right when I was applying to become a police officer.
Oh my goodness!
And it just sent me on a whole nother path.
I bet it did.
And so you have those kind of challenges growing up, and now as I get into my senior years,
active older adult age,
right. It's got its own unique challenges.
We have in front of us. And I don't want our break to come up before we talk about this.
Certainly.
This is some dice that you've put together. For those that are watching, that they are going to be able to see this. But you use this sort of as a tool because
it's an education tool.
It is.
It's called Roll of the Dice, and here I have to give a shout out to my friend Nita Thompson, who
Way to
designed
go, Nita.
this.
Okay.
Nita, she's amazing.
All right.
And
why don't you talk about this?
Let's talk about the dice here.
Okay.
So with the dice, we have dice that have a pink writing on it, and that's mom.
Okay.
And then you have the dice with the blue letters on it, and that's for
Okay,
dad.
That's for dad.
Okay?
So there's blue, and then
blue
there's
and
pink.
There's pink, right?
All
Okay,
right.
I'll let you hold the pink one.
All right.
Okay. Now, these are the genes that are available for the parent to pass on to the child.
All right.
As we see, the father has an S gene, which is S hemoglobin, and then a C gene, which is also
Okay.
another sickling hemoglobin called sickle C.
I have
Okay, and you
two
have-
S's. Oh, and I have several S's, but I have A's. What does A
Okay,
mean?
A is normal hemoglobin.
Okay, so that represents me.
That represents you have one A hemoglobin gene available
I
and
have-
one S
Oh, okay.
gene hemoglobin.
All right.
Okay, the fact that it's in three places allows it to
roll.
manifest into
A
proper
dice.
roll.
Yes.
And so we bang our genes together, make a little baby.
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 And then we roll the
And
dice.
then we roll the dice.
And I
Okay.
have an A.
And I have
An S.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So this means that this child will have the sickle trait disease. It has one normal hemoglobin gene
From me.
from you, and then I have passed on one of my sickle hemoglobin genes.
Okay.
And so this child will have the trait. So again, this is tested in California at birth. It has been since 1994
All right.
in California. And this
It's
person
just part- it's
would receive-
automatically,
right, this
correct?
automatically, all children, regardless of color, are tested for sickle cell disease. And this parent would receive a letter saying that this child has sickle trait disease and that there's no need for follow-up. And then, unfortunately, what happens is the parent probably throws that letter in a drawer and forgets to discuss it with the kid. And so this child has a good chance of growing up not knowing that it's carrying the trait.
Right.
Okay, and so
And
we're
not-
gonna
it's not
we're gonna
deliberate,
make
but-
some more kids
okay.
here. Let's do it. Let's
All
do
right, let's
another
have
quick
another
roll.
kid. All right.
And bang, bang,
Bang, bang, bang,
and
bang.
then we roll, and this child has.
Oh, it's
I've
the
passed-
same one.
Okay, all right.
So should we
So
try
we
another
got two
one?
childs. Sure, let's try one more.
Okay, I'm going to take
Okay.
this
grab,
one right here.
Grab a pink one though. One with pink.
Oh, that's right, because
Yeah,
I'm a
pink
pink girl.
letters. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have this baby,
All
you and
right.
I. Way to go.
Bang, bang.
I hope it worked for you.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Okay.
Oh, shoot. Let's
now-
pretend like it came back as a
okay,
T.
we'll come back as a T. Now, this is a condition. The T is thalassemia.
All right.
Again, this is one of the conditions that Europeans get a lot. It used to be called Cooley's anemia, and it's called thalassemia. And it comes in a couple of different forms.
All right.
And then I've also passed on my sickle gene to this. So this person will have sickle thalassemia.
Okay.
And it, again, is a condition with thalassemia. The way it affects the red blood cell is the red blood cells are smaller and don't carry as much hemoglobin, and they don't live as long as well, and they create a different type of anemia situation.
Okay.
And
All right. Well, we're going to talk more about this because I know that there's something that would have a C on it too, and that's
Right.
probably about sickle cell
the sickle
disease.
C. Again, that's the disease that I have is the SC.
Okay.
Because that is represented here with the sickle gene
All right.
and the C,
All right.
gene.
All right.
And so,
Well, it's really, there's a lot to be known about this, and you've been living
Certainly.
with it for so long. For some of us that are somewhat unfamiliar with all of these different genes, it's really interesting and really important.
it certainly is. And again, this is a gene that can come into your family from a number of different places. And so we're really emphasizing the need for people to know your
To be
status.
educated, you
Yeah.
bet.
And there's a simple test that you can get. It's called an electrophoresis test. Although they can do a blood smear, and sometimes they can see the sickle cells if you actually have the disease, but it doesn't pick up the trait
Okay.
from a smear, I believe. And so, again,
All right.
we're just saying everyone should know their status.
Exactly. What's the count?
What's
Which
the
is
count?
what? And this music we're listening to
Is from my show,
is,
The Call.
is from your show, The Call.
Yeah.
We're going to take another break, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll be back just in a moment to continue this conversation. You're listening to Born to Talk. I'm Marsha. This is KC.
I say You and I can come together in unity, lay the foundation, straighten up our community. Under one yard, the creator who oversees. Sickle cell doesn't have us, though we live with the disease. You and I can come together in unity, lay the foundation, straighten up our community. Under one yard, the creator who oversees. Sickle cell doesn't have us, though we live with the disease.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Hi, I'm Del Lady Jones, and I'm a certified relationship and divorce coach.
And I'm Debbie Carlin Boyle, a certified personal trainer, fitness instructor, and health coach.
Join us on Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Pacific, for Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul, and everything in between, exclusively on LA Talk Live.
Become part of the conversation with expert guests discussing life-changing topics such as relationships, divorce, longevity, parenting challenges, dating, intimacy, and so much more.
We would love to hear your opinions and questions, either on our Facebook page or by calling us directly at 323-473-3100. We are Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul, and everything in between. Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Pacific on latalklive.com.
You can also catch us on iTunes Radio, R&B, and now live on Facebook, or watch and listen directly at latalklive.com. And now on our YouTube channel, Del and Debbie Mind, Body, Soul. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
You know, there's some great songs that come out by an original, and then there's others that cover it. And I was familiar with this song by the original singers, and then I listened to your chosen version, and the heart of the matter. People are familiar with this song. I love this.
She really made it her own.
She did.
The passion of the original song was amazing.
Right.
But she just really brings it to
the heart of the matter.
Yeah, to the heart of the matter.
It's a perfect song choice to begin this segment. And I know there's so much we want to say, and we were running a little bit short on time. So we were talking about the dice, and you wanted to mention something that was connected to this.
I did, and that is the fact that my friend Nita, who designed this, is also in charge of the bone marrow registry, and she would kill me if I didn't mention it.
Oh, man. Don't let that happen.
The bone marrow registry, and not only that, but the cord blood registry. And these are two ways that we are able to treat sickle cell disease, and that stem cell replacement through bone marrow transplant is our only cure right now. But the challenge is that you need a matching sibling donor to donate the marrow, or you need to make the roll of the dice and catch somebody on the registry who matches you. And even though the odds are slim, the more people we have on the registry, the better the odds get. And this is curing people, this bone marrow transplant. It's not a universal cure because it's not available to everyone, but it does cure sickle cell disease. So
that's promising. And I think those are some of the things that I'd like to talk about now, because in going to some of these different sites and trying to educate myself a little bit about this before you and I got together, what became real apparent to me is that there are 4 really important priorities, and I thought we could talk about those individually, and you could educate us as well. So let's start with something that's, I don't want to say that one is more important to other, because in reality they're all very important.
Very, very much
So
connected.
let's talk about access to care. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Okay, the challenge with access to care is that sickle cell disease affects 100,000 people in this country. So there's not a lot of doctors who get to see this disease and a way of treating it. And there's not a lot of hematologists who specialize in sickle cell disease because there's not a lot of money in it. There's just simply not a lot of patients that are going to be coming through your door. And so most of the expertise comes out of the children's hospitals who fortunately, take such great care of our children. But one of the problems also with access to care is what our biggest challenge is right now, because we're losing our kids between 18 and 30 during that transition from childhood pediatric care to adult care. I mean, there's numerous issues as far as, kids being able to find insurance and get on insurance. And, if you're lucky and still, have a parent to guide you, a lot of these kids, don't.
They're adults now.
They're adults now. And you have that challenge. And you also have the challenge of, trying to go off to college, and who knows if you're going to land in an area where they have any knowledge at all of sickle cell disease. There are these places where we call it sickle cell deserts, where they have less than 500 patients and less than 20 specialists who can deal with sickle cell disease. And those are really optimistic numbers. Actually, it's a lot lower in some of these states. And so, again, the access to care is just really about finding people who are knowledgeable about sickle cell disease and who can give you the comprehensive care that's required, especially at the different stages of a person's sickle cell life.
Because there are stages in the
Certainly.
sickle cell life.
And in childhood, one of the most important things that you're dealing with is the possibility of stroke. 1 in 10 children will have a stroke from sickle cell disease. Absolutely.
You don't even think of children having strokes.
Oh, absolutely. And when we talk about, some of the global issues, the problem that we had in the very beginning with losing people in sickle cell disease was because children would get infections and they would get pneumonia and just die. I mean, it would just eat up their bodies because, again, sickle cell expresses itself in a sick environment. When the body becomes acidic or hypoxic, it promotes sickle cell disease, and so any type of infection is going to cause issues. And so we were losing children to that, and they started using prophylactic penicillin. Now at 6 months, they start children with sickle cell disease on that, and that started saving lives. And I think that happened with the Sickle Cell Disease Act in 1970, where they started requiring prophylactic penicillin as part of the treatment plan, as well as now they use transcranial Dopplers to check and see what the risk is for the child to have a stroke. And again, it's about 1 in 10 with that. There's also things like for babies, their hands swell and their feet swell up, and it can be painful. Also, parapism.
What is that?
Parapism is an erection lasting over 4 hours. It affects the males, and unfortunately, there's nothing they can do but go to the hospital and get the blood drained. And so that's a really difficult challenge for young men
and what you're
with
saying,
sickle cell disease.
With an access to care, you're somewhere where they don't know anything about it.
You're traveling. You're
in college.
Yeah, you're in college. But again, it can just be you're in a state that, I mean, my sister lived in Iowa City, and her challenge was, there were 2 hospitals available. The first hospital she went to says, we don't treat sickle cell disease. And just
move on.
Flat out, move on.
Wow.
And so that limits your ability to care. I mean, because you got one hospital, what if they don't treat sickle cell well?
What are you supposed to do?
Where are your options,
Right.
And so, again, access to care is certainly
critical.
A big issue for us.
Okay, I guess that's the perfect lead into training and professional education. More and more training is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And we need this training to be mandated. And that's there's a bill in California right now, it's AB 1488, that we're trying to get passed. And it's a bill that mandates that there be centers developed to coordinate this type of comprehensive care that's needed, as well as the education and training of the professionals who are treating this disease every day and doing so. I know that every professional does their absolute best, but there's a big difference between knowledge and expertise, and there just aren't enough experts.
Wow.
And so we need to make sure that the people who are dealing with people in emergency room situations, because the NIH guidelines suggest that when a person reports with sickle cell disease, that this the pain crisis happens again because the sickling cells stick together, they clot up in smaller blood vessels, and they cause pain. and the capillaries, and a lot of the pain is in the bone because the blood is being created in the bone, and as it transfers out through all these little systems of osmosis, that those sickling cells can get clotted up, it creates pressure in the bone. And most people explain the pain as if it's like someone has an ice pick and they're trying to hack their way out of the inside of your leg.
Man.
That's how they describe the pain. And so treating the pain is essential. And the NIH guidelines say that you should have this pain under control to the report of the patient within 30 minutes. But yet our patients are showing up at emergency rooms in this horrific pain and having to wait hours in the waiting room. And again, there are regulations that, I know that at least half of the emergency rooms use that say that sickle cell disease should be triaged, right behind a gunshot, literally. But that's not happening. And then, because of the war that we have on opiates right now, and there is a war because of terrible opiate addiction going on in America. But it's affecting the people who are really in need of the pain medicine. And people are suffering because of this. And you go into a hospital with the kind of pain that you have with sickle cell disease, the kind of pain that can make you literally pass out. It's so bad. And the first thing you have to do is fight with this doctor who tells you, I'm not going to give you the pain medicine
Right.
you need. And so, and again,
What a struggle.
it's a real struggle.
Oh, my
It's a real
gosh.
struggle. And so, we need to get people trained to understand that, these guidelines are there for a reason. And it starts with believing the pain, because they don't believe our pain. We deal with stigmatization of being drug seekers, because
gosh.
unfortunately, we need narcotics to treat this pain. And there are so many issues and so many stigmatizing events that take place.
It's already so bad
People calling
already.
us sicklers and calling us frequent flyers, and this is the perspective they have of sickle cell patients when they come in. Oh, here they are again, and
if they
not
only
realizing and not realizing not only that, how their treatment contributes to the problem, because
Right.
not treating acute pain leads to chronic pain issues. And so that's something that, again, we just have to we have to stop it, because they do more damage. And again, they take an oath to not do any harm.
Right.
But by not treating our pain, they don't realize again, there's a cycle that takes place when you're in pain. The body becomes hypoxic, and when you're hypoxic, you sickle more. And so there's a constant process going on, and if you don't jump on it and get it stopped, you actually prolong the process, and we end up having longer hospital stays, until the insurance says, okay, kick them out. And then sometimes they don't have the pain out of control, but now the insurance company
Is in control and say,
is in control, and they say, well, sorry, this is all you're going to get, we
Yeah.
need you out of here, and again, and they end up having to go to another hospital, okay. And then that's how that drug seeker thing follows you,
Right.
because they never controlled the pain originally to begin with, and then they didn't deal with it well in the week or whatever the insurance company gave us, and now this patient is going on with more issues. And so we have to get that kind of understanding of how the process of treating the pain really works. And
are there research facilities and clinical trials? Are there certain parts of the country where they're more leading the way in that area?
There are a number of advocacy groups in the way of research and clinical trials that are going on that are focused on the involvement of the patient in the clinical process and the research process, and really trying to get their perspective on how the drugs that they're developing will affect your life and your family, and getting a wider perspective more than just clinical aspects of the medicine. And so those are very good things. And then there's an agency I work with called the Rare Disease Advocates, who is a lobby on Capitol Hill that lobbies
Here in California or in Washington?
It's in Washington.
Okay.
In Washington, and they do a wonderful job of organizing and helping people to stay up to date on what's going on Capitol Hill. As far as that, the FDAA just put out a grants for research and clinical trials.
good.
So there's some good things going on there. And that's really, again, one of the most important factors. And again, one of the things that we really want them to realize, though, is the need for research into sickle cell trait. And again, they treat it as if it's a benign disease, but you can already see that this disease has issues. I mean, they're starting to discover, there's eye issues, there's kidney issues, again, the rhabdomyolysis event, and there's people with the trait who complain about pain. My own son, used to say, "Dad, my arms hurt. Dad, my legs hurt." And I used to think that he was mimicking me. Because that's sometimes the father, that the son does what he sees the father do.
Sure.
And so I kind of took it for granted. But then as I come to understand that this is actually part of the trait experience, and then on WDC What's to Count, we had a guest on that show who has sickle cell trait, that during her pregnancy she went into a full-blown crisis. Okay.
Did she lose her baby?
No, she didn't lose her baby, but, still, she has the trait. She's not supposed to be going into crisis, but she had her blood levels drop and all the representative, factors that would represent, including the pain. And so, there's a lot more research needed in that area, as well as again, we're just now getting our second treatment in the way of medication, L-glutamine. It's just been approved by the FDA, and it should be coming into the community soon.
An oral medication?
Yeah, it's actually a powder that you would put in a drink, right? And it is promising. It helps to reduce the number of crises as well as the length of the crises. The other treatment is the one that really changed my life, hydroxyurea, which was, I think, 1994. When they FDA approved that, and I went from having a sickle crisis event every 6 weeks to having one, maybe two a year, and my crises manifest differently. It's not that mind-blowing, overwhelming pain anymore. I mean, it's pain that I can manage, without having to go to the hospital every time. Sometimes I can just treat it at home with oral pain meds, and that's certainly a benefit, to not having your life interrupted like that.
No kidding.
And but not only that, but when you're in a crisis, and it's one thing that is so important for everyone to remember, is that these are clots, like little heart attacks going on in your body. And you can have them anywhere. You can have them in the organs. You can have them in your brain. My sister had a crisis in her brain. She was in a coma for 6 weeks.
All related to sickle cell?
Yeah, sickle cell. It's all related to these clotting blood vessels. A member of our cast had the same thing happen. Again, these childhood strokes. All of these things are representative of the different types of challenges that we need people to understand, that we can't be lingering in these conditions. They have to get these things under control because they do damage that lasts a lifetime.
Right.
And again,
it's important. I don't know if all of you are just grasping what this is like to live this life. And it's a global issue too. It isn't just right. Is that right?
That's absolute truth, Marsha. Again, we have a tendency to be a little self-centered here in America. 100,000 people, and they're all black. So that's kind of how the disease is perceived. But no, that's not the case. Again, this is a worldwide issue, and the problem worldwide is, again, we're very fortunate to be here in America having this disease, because there's places where the kids don't get the prophylactic penicillin. And in places like India and in Africa, they're losing as much as 80% of children between the age of 1 and 5 because of infections.
80%.
And this is in 2017.
Wow. I read that on that foundation page that we're going to talk about, because I know that, what is the name of the organization?
The Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California.
Yeah. So people can go to the scdfc.org website to learn more about this, and that's where I read that. I was just shocking. We're going to take a really quick break because, as you know, these shows go really fast. You produce shows, they just like, what happened? I thought we had an hour. What happened to our time?
Right.
This is just a beautiful song.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
I know that it's a powerful song. This is by Yolanda Adams, and it's called "Since the Last Time I Saw You." It's an emotional song, isn't it?
It is. This is a song that ministered to me after I had a near-death experience that was driven by sickle cell disease.
We're going to take a short station break, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Storm in my life.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Okay, Casey, I know that this is a really important message, and I hope you can get through it because it's emotional. So do your best,
Okay.
and why this song is important.
Well, again, the reality of sickle cell disease is that we lose people to this disease. People die. It shortens your life. In California, we still have the shortest life expectancy of anyone in the country, and it's at 48 for women and 43 for men. And we're hoping for better numbers now. Those are 2004 numbers, and we're hoping that the latest surveys will bring us some better numbers than
Right.
that. But I had a loss this year of my sister, my warrior twin, Inez, and so I just dedicate this show to her, and I'm dedicating, all the work of my advocacy and of what life I have left to honoring, that warrior walk that she walked, and again, she faced many challenges with her disease, and never lost that smile on her face, never lost her faith, always was encouraging to me, and to many others, and so I just,
We want to
Inez
dedicate-
Walker, I want to dedicate this show to her.
Thank you for saying
And,
that. And also her husband.
And yes,
Butch.
Her husband Butch supported her so amazingly, and the two of them were really, really warriors together. And I really believe that Butch passed a month after my sister, and I really believe he died of a broken heart.
He did. He wanted to be with her.
He just followed her home, and I know that they're together, and they're happy, and I'm very, very thankful for
Right.
the faith and strength with which they walked in their journey together. And so, thank you, Marsha.
You're
for
welcome.
letting
I
me say
wouldn't
that.
want the show to conclude without talking about that. I also want to tell you about next week's show because, as you know, we produce these shows, and I'm here every week, and I'm going to have a show next week that's very, very interesting. Monica Phillips is going to be joining me, and she is the assistant director of the Peggy Albright Friendly House that was established in 1951. It was one of the first sober living homes for women in the country. It started in 1951, and we're going to be talking about what sober living means to women here in this Los Angeles area. I'm really looking forward to sharing that story with you about how women are making a change in the life of addiction of drugs and alcohol. And I guess one thing that I wanted to say before we lose our conclusion here is that how are you today? How are you feeling today? Because I know just by speaking to you, Casey, over this week in preparation for the show, you were having a lot of leg trouble, weren't you?
Yeah. I'm really facing some challenges with my legs right now, avascular necrosis, and some of the other issues. Osteomyelitis, I think, is the effect that it has on the tissues around the hips, and I'm just losing my strength, and I wanted people to really have a good perspective of how this disease can affect you over a lifetime. So I wanted to take a read through my secondary issues to sickle cell disease. And it starts with AVN, which is avascular necrosis of the bone, chronic hepatitis C, which I received from a blood transfusion at a young age, cirrhosis of the liver, which was a gift from the hepatitis C. Chronic chest wall pain, which manifests from different clotting issues in my chest. Other chronic pain. I'm blind in my left eye due to sickle cell retinopathy. I have esophageal varices and cirrhosis, and that's because the liver doesn't function well. Your body creates these other blood vessels to try and increase the blood flow to the liver, and they go up around your esophagus and cause pain in your throat. And then chronic venous insufficiency is basically your blood vessels being weakened and not causing a good return of blood, so you get some edema and swelling and things of that nature.
My gosh.
Chronic kidney disease at stage 3.
The list goes on.
Yeah, the list goes on. And this is one of the issues with getting older with sickle cell disease, because we are living longer now.
Yes,
we have all these complications.
It sounds like it.
And so we need a real comprehensive treatment plan for those of us who are getting older.
You do.
It's a real challenge.
And as this obviously, like does your show go an hour and a half?
Yeah. Well,
I can see why.
Absolutely.
Because we're to the end of my 1 hour show.
Oh my goodness.
And I play this for you and all my guests that come onto the show, Casey.
I love
and that
you
is,
too.
I love you too. And I wish you a beautiful day and as healthy as you can be each day, one step at a time. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm so delighted to have you join me. And I hope that all of you, truly, Rich, thank you. For all of you that were listening today, you can really get more insight by going to that Google sickle cell. Be informed and listen to What's the Count, and listen to the call, and educate yourself and share it with others. In the meantime, be kind, everyone. Be good to your neighbors. Be good to yourself. Start with yourself. And I will see you next week with Monica Phillips. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network, original reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Stay tuned.